out of wrong thought processes and myths, especially as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. The audience will benefit from our ability to make sterilization and infection control measures plain by translating regulatory jargon into daily language and actionable steps. Steps that not only include us, but consider us. The same for the community. There are things that are including us but don't consider us. And so we're going to look at it. We're going to vet. Where did you hear it from? Who said it? Is it sound? Does it make sense? Is it knowledge or is it nonsense? Here we are. We are our own voice. You matter, I matter, we matter, and we're better together. Join us on Knowledge or Nonsense. Hey, how everyone. How you doing? My name is Sharon Combs with UCDI Leadership and Do Something Daily LLC. I want to thank you so much for joining us on this evening, as we're going to talk about some financial things, some financial mindsets, some financial practical tips. Going to learn a little bit about redlining, and hopefully you all will be able to ask the guests some questions. So we have Philip Washington with us, and we have Stacy Robinson Holt with us. We also have Donnie Payne. So feel free to share this video. Again, this is for the community, especially those within the sterile processing community, because a lot of times you may be making money doing contracts, but if you don't know what to do with that money, it'll still be like water or sand in your hands. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's just ask some questions. So I'm going to start with you, Stacy.
Okay.
I'm so glad you're here. Yay!
Thanks for having
me. It's easier said than done, but people talk about budgeting, and we have an idea of what budgeting looks like in our mind. And people like, I'm on a budget. It's almost like a diet. It's something people do repeatedly over their life, but yeah, and not really, because they still got that weight and they still spend their money like that. So what would you say to somebody who is actually, like they would say, well, I tried budgeting and it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. I tried budgeting and it doesn't work. What would you say to that?
The first thing I would ask them is, have you really tried it? Have you really worked your budget? Like you said, with dieting, it's similar in that you have to be intentional about it. The one thing that I've learned in my life, and that what I like to encourage clients to do, is to have some accountability. A lot of times, and I really like the analogy you used with weight, right? So I know that I do better when I have accountability. And so a lot of people say, hey, don't talk about your money. Don't tell anybody what you're making, what you're doing, how you're moving. But I think it's important. You need to have some type of advisor or some type of financial education in order to really to stick to your budget.
All right. Anyone else? Philip, you're a man of investing. Has budgeting always been a part of your life, or was this something that you came to see the wisdom of later?
Yeah, some of it, but it was a necessity, right? Because I've never had a salary. I've always, I think the last time I got paid, something was like $7.25 or something like that. No, what? I got tips, Papa those. They paid us $2 an hour. So I, early on I was pretty terrible at budgeting, but what I ended up learning is just myself, believe it or not, like I'm not naturally a budgeter. As a matter of fact, I'm not detail oriented much at all. But what I learned was if I set up a system, then I can stick to it. And so what I found to work is, we'll break up our money into kind of 3 different buckets, right? So we have like what comes off first is 20% splurge account, right? Some people say, oh, pay yourself first, blah, blah, blah. And that sounds good, but nobody does it. So I say, hey, listen, let's take 20% of what you make and let's put it in an account. Like Kelly has an account, my wife, I have an account. That's why I buy all my Adidas gear, right? We got like a family account. And so that's just like money that we can spend whatever we want on it. Like just whatever, like no judgment. She buys what she wants to buy. I buy what I want to buy. And then the 60% covers like basic living expenses, which nobody overspends on, like, basic stuff, right? You're not going to overspend on gas or groceries or just stuff that you got to buy. And then that leaves the other 20% for saving, investing, paying off debt. But because human nature, I address the Hey, look, you got 20% of what you make. Like, there's no excuse now. You get to buy whatever you want to buy. I'm not telling you what you can't do. I'm saying, like, spend this every month. Go spend it. And so that worked for us, and it tends to work for clients that I talk to because, for whatever reason, we should budget, and I agree with budgeting. But human beings, like budgeting just creeps me out. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to budget.
I remember years ago when I first met you, when I came to the DFW area, we were talking, and you were actually talking about the psychology of money. And you were like, man, this makes so much sense. And like, things do make so much sense. And you're like, but something about the psychology, people just is like, no, like it makes sense. They can see it makes sense. And then it's like, no. And I was like, oh, I never thought about that. But that's why you do the 20%. All right, Don, you have any way in on the budget?
Yeah, for me, I'm with Philip. I cannot budget. Like, no matter how hard I try, I just can't. So I had to actually just give myself an allowance account. So I have my check card. So part of my check goes into my allowance, and the rest goes to cover my bills and expenses. So my allowance account, I go through the line all the time and get embarrassed because I cannot, I did not budget. I failed to budget properly, but I know when it tells me I can't get anything else, I don't go over to my main account. I just live without that, whatever I was purchasing.
Quit playing.
I'll be like, oh, I can't get this drink. Thank you very much for making it. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. That's funny.
My budget. Yeah.
What's interesting, what I find interesting though is similar to what Philip said, is really about setting up a system for yourself. So it's not necessarily, even though, I hear you, Philip, and you're saying, well, I don't really budget, but that actually is budgeting. That you put a certain percentage for yourself, a certain percentage for saving, and then you live off your expenses. And so that's what I like to kind of debunk that myth that budgeting is like super rigid. Okay, this is what we're doing. Mm-hmm. No, budgeting is about having a system, knowing where your money is going so that, you're telling your money what to do instead of telling you what you can do.
Look, don't tell them that though. Listen, don't tell them. I just tell them. I just say you're not budgeting, but they're really budgeting. So just don't tell them.
That's fair.
Because when you tell them that, then all of a sudden everything is like, oh, I got to clean my room, or I have homework, because they already have budget equated with some like a negative or a restrictive connotation. So you're like, don't tell them. Psychology is a bugaboo.
It is.
You know what it's like? It's like the Confederate flag, right? People be like, but it doesn't stand for racism. Listen. To me, it does. So just don't do it. Like, I don't even want to hear it because I don't even want to hear your rationale. It's racist, right?
And that's how people do budgets.
Yeah, like, it doesn't matter what you have to say. And you're taking away from me right now.
Yeah.
I remember people talking to me about budgets, and immediately, as soon as everything they could say makes sense, and I could be nodding outside and inside, like, yes, I can do it. And then they say budget, and then something in me already is like my eyes start twitching, and I start thinking about all the other diets I failed at, all the other budgets that didn't work. And so I do like what you said, Stacey. I love everything you said, but this part really hits too when you said that about accountability. Because accountability is not a negative word. You can have a partner, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean you have to tell everybody and their mom what you're doing, but you can have a partner, someone that's like, man, you've been killing it this week.
Facts.
Like you got new shoes. I saw 4 Amazon boxes. Yeah, so yeah.
Right. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I
was just gonna say I actually didn't get my my money together. I won't call it a budget anymore.
But I don't even call it a budget.
You got to segment it.
Yeah. So honestly, if I'm being transparent, until I got married, right? So I knew all of these principles when I was single, but it wasn't until I got married and we had that accountability to kind of keep myself in line.
So I like that. So it's not about a budget. It is about organizing your money. And so that's why she is the money organizer. Hey, listen, ask questions. I see Karen has already asked a question. We're going to take a quick break. I do want to say thanks to the sponsors. When we come back, I am going to let you know who we have with us today on the show. And again, Ask questions. Listen, it's not often that you have people who are financial literacy, like advocates, financial experts, subject matter experts, that just come and are willing to like just say, hey, here's some tips, here's some things you can do. But here they are today. So ask the questions. Also, for a couple of individuals, if you want to come back later, just send something to info@ucdileadership.com. Later in the show, I'll let that go across on the ticker, and just put like a all access pass in the subject line, and we'll pick a couple of people to come behind the scenes after the show so that you can speak more directly with our subject matter experts today. But right now, we're going to take a quick break and be back shortly.
Today, I want to talk to you about inheritance versus legacy. Inheritance versus legacy. Those are two separate things. Inheritance is what you leave behind. Legacy is who you leave behind. Inheritance is your life insurance policy. Inheritance is your house. Inheritance is your car. Inheritance is your money. When I die, my wife dies, my children, my grandchildren will have an inheritance. And I think that's a wonderful thing that every responsible person tries to leave an inheritance for their family. But that's different from leaving a legacy. A legacy is who you're going to leave behind. Who will say, he believed in me? Who will say, he gave me an opportunity? Who will say, when I was down, he picked me up? Who will say, he loaned me his credibility? Who will say, he invested in my life? Who will say that I'm here because of him? As good as inheritance is, it'll go away. The house will break down. The car will break down. Something will burn up. This will go away. This will live on. This is your legacy. The question is not, which one should I do? The question is, I know you're working on your inheritance, but I also want to work on your legacy so you can leave an inheritance as well as a legacy.
Really want us to know the difference between inheritance and legacy. I really want, my hope is that individuals come out of living in the immediate. I know when we first start to grow, and we first start to generate revenue, and we first start to get checks that look good to us, then what happens is sometimes we spend them just as quickly. And so we have these financial experts here. We have Philip Washington of Ask Philip and Stonehill Wealth Management. Philip has spent the last 14 years providing advice, guidance, and analysis to investment committees and individuals around the selection and management of their retirement portfolios. So if you're interested in investing, you definitely want to reach out. He's currently the CIO, Chief Investment Officer of Stonehill Wealth Management. It's a registered and advisory firm. I'm gonna ask you about that in a little bit, Philip. Like, what does that mean? Is something different with it being an advisory firm than just an investment firm? He's the author of Retirement Investing 101, and he hosts the weekly show and podcast, Ask Philip. He lives in Grand Prairie with his wife, his beautiful wife, Kelly, and his two smart and energetic boys, Tate and Kellen. Stacy is a financial literacy advocate. She's been passionate about helping individuals and families with money for years. After realizing there was a financial knowledge gap, she was like, what can I do? And how can I help these young individuals, especially young adults and women, just get more acclimated and more apprised of the knowledge. Like, find out a little bit more about your money and how budgeting can help you in the present and in the future. She currently serves as a financial educator for a gap year program and works as a senior finance member with an energy company in Atlanta. Now that I've said all of that and read those beautiful bios, and then Donnie Payne, who is the CAO of Sip Consults, Casey's Properties, which is real estate, both corporate and residential. So definitely know some business matters there. Now that I've read all of that, let's go and let's see before we jump back into the questions, I want to talk about the video. Yes, I do. Because a lot of people in our field, in sterile processing and in the frontline field, they spend most of their money on the inheritance part, but for right now, not even just leaving it to somebody else, but like, what can I buy right now? But they don't really focus on legacy, which is more about passing down information, which is more about breaking a cycle of poverty, which is more about positioning yourself and your community so that you can affect change and not have to just be at the mercy of whatever other decisions people make. When you guys are counseling individuals, do you find that people assume that legacy and inheritance are the exact same thing, or is legacy something that people even consider when they first get into money management, shall I say? Yeah.
Ladies first.
Okay. I'm happy to jump in on that one. I don't think that people are initially thinking of that. I know I can tell you one of the reasons I got into helping people organize their money is because of things that were passed down to me, right? So I was encouraged to get my first credit card when I was 16, and I was literally in debt from that time, right? So no one ever taught me that, I was never given that information early years. So I've made it, I've been very intentional about educating my daughter so that we can break that cycle of having to manage debt, having to pay school loans for years and years once we're out of school. And so I believe, even though I hadn't thought of it in probably in that box of legacy versus inheritance, it is definitely my goal to educate my community so that they can pass on wealth knowledge and that be a legacy for them.
That's what's up.
And their families.
What's up?
Yeah, I agree. I think most people that I've talked to, maybe because of the business I'm in, a lot of folks are having the conversation, maybe thinking more forwardly than most, but a lot of folks I meet want legacy, whether they have money or don't have money. It's just a matter of, like Stacey said earlier, having the accountability to do it, right? A lot of people want it, and they don't know how. But I don't even think knowing how is the issue, because you can Google anything. It's the accountability. Use the analogy of working out and eating healthy. Over the last 30 years, the fitness industry has exploded. There's way more resources now than there were 30 years ago, but we're fatter. You know what I'm saying? We're fatter. It's not. You know what I'm saying? As a country, we're fatter.
Yeah.
It's not information. It's accountability. You know what I mean? And even me, I hired a coach who's helping me work out, and I'm like, I ain't worked out this much since
Since then, right? Since then.
Because I was in high school, and it worked out because my son's karate school closed down. And then I was like, cool, we got some money freed up. And my buddy was doing it virtually. So I said, hey, look, just train me and my son in this Muay Thai. And it worked. But, I think I'm pretty disciplined. I think I care. But I ain't worked out this hard since I was 19.
All right. So I want to ask a couple of questions. By Lila Price.
Question in about
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Donnie.
Oh, I was going to ask about piggybacking as far as helping someone to build credit. You touched on it a little bit in organizing when you got a credit card. So I'm not sure if you got your own credit card in your name when you were 16, or if someone co-signed for you, or how that went. And do you think it's a great way for someone to build credit?
Okay. Actually, I needed to correct myself. I was 17. It was right when I got out of high school.
Thank you.
Yeah, I actually got it on my own. It was a Macy's credit card. It was Macy's and Discover. And
the Discover card.
Yeah. And we were close friends for years and years. I ended that relationship. But I do think it is a way that you can build credit. So my daughter, I have her on my American Express card. So to help her build credit. You just have to, you have to be careful always and just be responsible with it.
What age? I don't even know. Like, what age do you need to have? Does your kid need to be to start doing that? They can be any age.
I'm actually not sure of the age that she was 19 when we did it. She went off to college, and I just wanted her to. It was more of a need in case there was an emergency. I wanted her to have something, but it did help with her credit because she was on ours.
I wanted to ask. This is going to be a two-part question, and then I'm going to bring in a lady named Dee Lewis. She's going to share a brief story. Lila, if you have any questions, or any questions that someone may have in the group, because people don't want to ask stuff about their money, but I know you've heard some. Just throw them out there.
Okay. I have a couple, so.
Okay. Then what I want to say, I'm gonna start with Stacy, and then Philip, I want you to take it from there, because like right now, a lot of people like, how can I even consider saving money when I'm already stretched to the max? Like the way the world is now, all this stuff going on, people like, you trying to get me to do more? Listen, I don't know what's popping off right now. I can't plan effectively, which is a fallacy anyway. And then Philip, I want you to kind of come in and say, I want you to tell us, how does a depression like impact investors? Like how much should we move, or if we should move at all, just based on all the stuff going on? So it's a two-part question, and they're two separate things. Philip works with investors. Stacy helps people organize their money. You don't know where your stuff is. She's going to help you get it organized and find out where it's going. So how can I even think about saving right now?
So this may be a very challenging time.
I'm already broke, but not really.
This could be a challenging time to save, but I think when your money, number one, when your money is organized, in theory, I know I was talking to Donnie earlier, and she said having a 3 to 6 month emergency fund can be a myth for some people, but it is an actuality for others. And so I think it's important to, I'm sorry, I'm losing my thought. Prioritize. That's the word I'm looking for. I'm sorry.
No, that's a good word.
Prioritize the necessities, right? So this may not be your season to save, if we're being honest. But if you don't know how much money you have and how much your living expenses are, then you don't know if you actually have the ability to be putting a little bit aside now anyway. Does that make sense? So I think it's so important. I feel like so many people don't even actually know. If I were to ask someone, what are your living expenses? Do you know how much you need every month to keep your living expenses going? They usually don't know. And then another question I like to find out is, okay, so that's your living expense in a normal environment. Do you know what like a skinny down budget is, right? So that when maybe you have to cut the cable, or you can't do the entertainment, or you have to tighten up, do you know what that absolute dollar is that you have to have in order to maintain your lifestyle throughout a particular season? And so like I said, it may not be your season to save, but you always need to know what you're working with.
Yeah, you need to get organized so you can take an assessment.
Exactly.
Know your bottom line.
Well, I don't have the money. Why you sit in the drive-through, or
or at the hair salon.
Nails, you know what I'm saying? I want a haircut.
Cut your own yard, or look, instead of getting Hennessy, why not E&J?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, get off the couch, get it off tap. So Philip, along those lines, so for people who maybe already have saved money and they have like the 3 to 6 months, but now this depression or whatnot is happening, how does that impact investors?
Yeah, and let me backtrack. You're saying from a depression standpoint, right? So they got money with depression. How does that impact investors? So basically, economies like work the same way, just like the body works the same way. I'm a nerd, so I've studied like economies, different time periods, different countries, and they all work, very, very similar. And so when an economy is old, you end up with a depression type scenario. And I won't bore you with the details, but you're in depression when interest rates are pretty close to zero, right? So that's kind of like one of the major trigger points, because typically to get out of an economic recession or when things slow down, if the government makes money cheaper by lowering interest rates, that puts more money in the system, right? Like money is like, think of like money to an economy like blood, And so when you have a recession, the economy is anemic. It needs more money. So if you lower interest rates, then that means when we buy cars, we can pay less to buy cars, pay less to buy houses. It trickles through and frees up money. And so when you have it at zero, there's like not an ability to be able to do that. And so the rules change. But to answer the question specifically, without going nerd on you, in a depression, every time the same asset classes work well, right? So cash typically is a great temporary position. Also, government bonds, right? Think of bonds like when rates go low, they go higher. So if interests are going down more, which happens in a depression, bond prices go up. So bonds are good to own. And then also, that's going to say, okay, if I'm going to own stocks, I want to own stocks of companies that are strong financially, because when people are in a depression, they flock to safety, right? So they want good companies, and they also want companies that are growing. So think of like Amazon, Facebook, Apple.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so you can look at any depression and you can say, all right, what portfolio worked well? It was financially strong companies that were growing, also bonds and cash. But then I like to also throw in gold and nowadays Bitcoin, because what ends up happening is every single time you're in a situation and the government needs to get out of a depression, they always print money. Always print money. There's, like every time, no matter if it's 100 years ago, 50 years ago, in Indonesia, in Spain, right? They print money. Like it just always happens. And so what happens when you print money? People trust money less, right? They're like, man, like this is monopoly money. At like 3 months ago, matter of fact, 4 years ago, they were like, we can't afford healthcare. And then 2 months, they printed like $10 trillion. You know what I mean? And so, and by the way, it hasn't stopped. So people begin to say, all right, like, I'm not going to own this stuff because it's terrible. And nobody pays attention to this but me, the nerd. But gold is trading its high against every other currency except the U.S. dollar. It's at its highs relative to that currency and every other currency except the dollar, right? And it's still doing well in dollar terms. And so you tend to say, okay, gold may or may not do well while we're in a recession because it goes down in inflation, but you're kind of buying it cheap because when they print the money, that's where the money is going, right? Money's going to gold. It's going to Bitcoin, which is digital gold, and I can explain that later. But it's another. I
just go on record as saying, right about Bitcoin, I just start drowning. I don't even know what's going on right now. But I got Bitcoin. Gold is good.
Yeah.
Gold is good.
Yeah. So I have a question. In this time when they're reducing interest rates, so for people that do already have debt, so if you have a car loan, if you have a mortgage, do you recommend people refinancing during this time to get those lower interest rates? Is that beneficial?
Yeah, so it depends, right? It depends on if it's going to be like most people who are refinancing are, not most, but a lot of people who are refinancing, there's not a big enough gap, right? So they say, oh, I save $50 a month. Don't worry about that because they're going to take on finance charges that, I'm saying? Like, you really got to do the math and say, if I keep paying this or I take this payment with the new finance charge, am I better off, right? And if you're better off, yeah. If you're not, no. And that's kind of the basic answers. Just make sure the math adds up. A lot. Rates have not dropped enough in the last 12 months to make it make sense because they were already low,
So is there a formula that either of you recommend for people? Because people think that if they're saving on interest, like I'm saving a whole bunch of money, but like you said, they're not including all of those extra fees that are tacked on. So is there a formula or a minimum amount that you should consider when you're refinancing?
I mean, I would say
Question down there too.
Yeah, I would say 2% is a good rule of thumb, but it's still not good. Like if you're not if it's not more than 2%, then you can like kind of ignore it, right? Then once 2%, then you can do the math, right? But I tend to say just always do the math because the math isn't hard, I guess for me. But I'm just saying like.
Ask me. Yeah. Time what?
Yeah. Listen, I'm busy right now. I am busy.
Yeah, don't ask.
Yeah.
I wanted to do this. Someone asked about, does refinancing hurt your credit score? But I want to ask, Sydney had asked a question about paying off loans. So does refinancing hurt your credit score? And while you guys are answering that, I want to put Sydney's question back up. And if somebody can speak to that, we want to be, listen, ask your questions. Even though I'm asking questions, if you put a question in here, I'm going to go with your question. We want your questions to get answered. I can ask these questions later in the back room. If any of you want to come to the back room, again, just send something to info@ucdileadership.com and put all access pass in the subject line, and we'll pick a couple of individuals, and then you can ask some questions even after. But ask the questions. Like, don't sit on a question, man. Don't be like, well, this is what somebody told me. Put it out here and see if, I mean, especially if they sitting on the stoop or the rooftop or on the porch next to you, they don't know. They're guessing it best too. So don't let that person be your financial advisor. Don't take advice from people who are, anyway, you get what I'm saying. Okay, so does refinancing hurt your credit score?
That's above my pay grade. I don't know. What about you?
Right. So if we don't have an answer for that, I will find an answer out. And
I'm halfway joking, for real. So
okay.
Yeah. So what impacts your credit score is going to be like how much debt you have to income. That's like something like a third, right? Then it's going to be another big chunk is going to be are you paying things on time? I don't know what that is, right? And then another percentage is going to be what's the other one? I forget. Like
how much you're using. How much you're using of your credit, I think.
Yeah, credit utilization. And then inquiries and all that are going to be part of it. So that doesn't fit either of those buckets. I think you just need, you have to, like, if you had a lot of inquiries lately, then you got to have an inquiry to refinance, and so that may ding your credit.
And don't ask like 3 or 4 people at once, because all of those inquiries is what you're saying is going to like ding, ding, ding.
Dings.
Actually.
Okay. Actually, let's do it.
Actually, when you're trying to get a mortgage and you have several within a short time frame, it doesn't ding your credit.
Oh. See?
So it depends on the type of credit you're applying for.
I would have been.
I know that for certain for a mortgage, I can't speak to other types of inquiries.
That's good information, because I always thought that if you did that, then you would be penalized for. That's why I was like, well, I don't want to ask more than 1 or 2 people. And so okay.
But this must mean. Yeah, but it sounds like she's saying it depends on maybe the type of credit you're applying for.
Correct. So I only know that for a mortgage.
Okay. So it's based on the type.
Not for a car. Or a retail credit card.
I can't speak to that.
Macy's cards, several Macy's cards.
Yeah, she's like, Macy's.
Yeah.
You want to say, when paying off credit card debt, how much would you suggest paying monthly? And since we don't know how much this person has, is there like a percentage or anybody?
No, I mean, I would say, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I mean, it depends. I mean, again, it depends on what you have, so that you know how much you can afford to pay on a credit card. I would definitely say do not just, pay the minimum, because that's not going to work. But there isn't a formula for, it depends on, how much debt you have, how quickly you're trying to pay it off. So it's difficult to speak to I would say a general answer for how much should you pay monthly.
Here's what I recommend to anybody who's in credit card debt. Buy 1 or 2 books, right? Buy Total Money Makeover if you are over the age of 40, right? Dave Ramsey's book is great. If you're like under the age of 40, buy a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, because he specifically writes to like young folks and millennials who don't want like they speak different, right? It's not a break, they just speak differently. And just follow the program, because they have an amazing program on how to get off debt. And literally you can like take your situation and apply it step by step to build your own plan, because we're just gonna say it depends. But this literally, if you read those books, you'll come away with a plan, and you can probably read them in like 2 or 3 hours. Because the I Will Teach You to Be Rich book, you only got to read like the first chapter, and it'll get you out of credit card debt. Because the first chapter is about debt.
Now, who is it by? Do you remember?
He's a blogger named Ramit, R-A-M-I-T, Sethi, S-E-T-H-I. This dude makes like 8 figures a year on a blog. It's ridiculous.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Someone else asked. Oh, guys. Okay. So the questions are coming in. But before I ask those, Lila, let's go. Let's hit these awesome individuals up.
So
Thank you so much for your time.
So the questions from people that I've spoken to are people who are traveling, which is part of the groups that we discussed. So they travel for a living, and so they have an income that they get subsidized with some other with income. So they can get a housing allowance type of situation, and they can also get another stipend for meals and incidentals, and then they can also get their base rate. And those are the people who sometimes are struggling from the questions I got with budgeting and how to do that. Because I know that even for myself, when I traveled, I had to still cover, I still paid my rent at home where I lived. And then I had to pay rent wherever I was working. And then also had to figure out how to budget everything else in life. So it became difficult. It was a lot of money. It was great money. People always ask me, I'll do it in a heartbeat, go back to it. But you have to be very meticulous about how you spend your money and what you do with your money when you get it. And also got to go into your negotiations for your contract, knowing what you need to survive and how you need to be able to live. So I just kind of wanted some, based on those questions that I saw from people from the group, were just mainly just how do you negotiate the best type of salary considering all of that? And how do you make sure that you're getting the top rate for those type of things when you consider your budget, your investments, and how you want to, your long-term, after you finish traveling, in 10, 20 years, when you're ready to retire, what can you pull out to help you sustain in the long run? I know there's a lot of questions. I'm sorry, but that's what I got.
I felt like this.
But I wanted to make sure I hit everything that people had discussed with me. But I think that I think for me, it's more important is just knowing how to budget for someone who has made traveling maybe their career. How can they save? But how can they budget and also save for retirement? Maybe that's probably the more important meat of it.
Can I start, and then because I'm gonna give a non-technical answer and Stacey might give a technical answer.
Okay.
So when my wife and I, got married, first off, my wife was she was above average, like when it comes to handling money. Like when I married her, she had a house. She wasn't like irresponsible with money. She just like married a financial planner, so poor her, right? Because I was set on spending zero money until we had like $1 million in the bank. So we had like tension. And so early on, she would say, well, can we do this or can we do that? Or, what do we do with this? And so-and-so has this or so-and-so, this is what they drive. And me, a lot of our friends were clients, but I can't tell her their financial situation because that's not cool. But I just was like, hey, listen, just understand that things aren't always what they seem. You know what I'm saying? Like people,
right.
People that I know that are our age who have money, they don't have these things. And the ones that don't have money that are our age, they have these things and more, right? And so I said, just if people will psychologically understand, you don't need to impress anybody. Like There's nobody who you need to impress, right? Because that's fundamental. A lot of people like they buy the super expensive car, right? Like and the Hennessy versus E&J joke, like that's legit. Like I drink E&J when we go to family events. I make more money than most. We make more money than most of our people in our family, and they're bringing the Hennessy, the ones that are struggling. I'm like, I'm doing E&J because it's, you know what I'm saying? Like it's in me to cut. Like I don't care to impress you. You call me cheap. It give me the same buzz, right? You know what I'm saying? And Hennessy is not that smooth anyway. Whole other note. But the point is, you know, you get to a point to where psychologically you're like, I don't need to impress you, right? You know, I'll impress you 15 years from now. You know what I'm saying? When some subtle hint drops that I actually have money, because you're never gonna know. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not gonna let you know, and I'm not gonna show you. You know what I'm saying? It's just gonna be, you're gonna pick it up. You know what I'm saying? And the other part is, you know, and Donnie, you might know this. You know, the winners know. So you can fool people who don't know. Like, it's funny. People who don't have money, like, I know it in an instant. I can meet you and I can know if you have money because it's subtle. And I can really know when you don't have money, right? I know a lot of folks who don't have money and who are faking, and they think they're faking me. But the people who have money or who know people who have money, like, they see it. You're not fooling anybody. So I think psychologically, if you can understand that you don't got to impress anybody, and by the way, you're not fooling anybody, you know, that'll help budgeting a whole lot better.
I want to jump in for you, Stacey. So for me, because I work in the world with Lila and travelers, so one of the things I always recommend people to do is see what you can offload. Like, you don't always have to have a fancy house or apartment wherever your resident is, and try to live luxurious while you're on the road. Like, figure out which one actually works best for you so you can save as much of those benefits that you're being afforded per assignment, because we know that things vary, you know, from each assignment and each account. So I can't make my standard of living if I know that the average salary for that position is $35,000 or $40,000 for that area, and I look up on one that pays me $80,000. I can't make my living expenses off of that $80,000 one-time account for the rest of the time. I have to budget accordingly, and when I do have more, then I still live off of that initial 40, 50, whatever I was gaining. So I always recommend for people not to overspend. Like, we budget as much as you can, like streamline and cut out as many expenses as possible. Stay with your mom, stay with a cousin, especially if you're traveling. Why do you need all these extra places? Especially for people who don't have responsibilities or kids, someone that needs an extra place. You know, like whatever bills you can offload, that saves hundreds of, if not thousands, each month. So every single month that you're on the road, if you're able to save $1,200 per month, that right there puts your emergency fund leaps and bounds above anything else. So whenever your next account, there are some adjustments that you need to make, you've already saved $3,300 or 32, you know, like whatever it is in that 13-week assignment. So I always recommend cutting out what you can in the meantime. And we don't always have to have a car. That's another thing. If I'm traveling, I don't have to have a car. If there is some other form of transportation, or if I can use Uber, whatever is the most cost effective is what I have to do, because my ultimate goal is to save. So whatever adjustments we have to make, this is what needs to happen.
I love that. I kind of want to jump in too, because
you don't let the organizer get us.
Yeah, I know, right? The non-expert is speaking. But even with COVID, because I too am in this space, even with COVID, you get used to spending what you make. And a lot of times you're making based off of those stipends, those housing allotments, the per diems. And so you're getting that net check. And that net check got you feeling some type of way. But then something happened with COVID, or maybe you get hurt a little bit and now you need some short-term disability or unemployment. And they're not going to give you that net check. They're going to give you that pay rate. And so $20 that hour that was going toward non-tax, now your bills are set up off you making $28 to $34 an hour. but you really are about to make 14, and they're going to tax it. And so we saw that even with COVID. You know, people, they really thought unemployment was going to give them the
max.
No, they're not getting anything that's not your pay rate. And so that's what we want to be thinking about. Like, that's why you do want to save the $1,200. The money organizer, Stacey, you had told me something about $400 and how, can you tell me about that $400? This is a game changer, y'all. This is
all right. So about 45 to 50% of America can afford a $400 unexpected expense without using a credit card. Right? And so that's why it's so important to have that emergency fund, some personal savings, and not relying, you know, on credit card and debt to make your way through life.
Yeah, and so I mean, $400 could be like the start to go out in a car. You know, what'd you say, Donnie?
You said 40%.
Americans.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, thinking about that, the salary, where people are like, give me the least amount for my salary in traveling, it also makes people not lendable. So as we're talking about trying to one day want a house or a car, you won't be able to gain it based off of a per diem or off of a housing stipend. They go off of your hour, what your W-2 wage is. So just like with your unemployment or any government benefits that come along, your lendability is based on that hourly rate. So that's something I always recommend for people. It is great and fitting for the time because you might have some extra, but if you're not saving, it puts you in more of a financial setback. It puts you in more of a financial setback when you try to build your legacy or provide things for your family in the future. Because if you're only running off 13 an hour, you're gonna have to get a house that runs with that 130. $110,000 house if it's available in the area you live in.
And I'm gonna we're gonna come back, but I'm gonna play that video again. Normally I play commercials like for SIPS or CS Assist. So let me do the commercial now. SIPS Consults and CS Assist, I thank you so much for sponsoring the show. CS Assist is the #1 online resource for anything within sterile processing. So if you're looking for forms, formulas, competencies, anything of that nature, really look at CS Assist because they understand sterile processing. SIPS is the #1. Listen, it has to do with sterile processing and definitely within leadership. If you're wanting to grow your career and know more about being a consultant, know more about being your own type of business, you really want to connect with SIPS Consults. But I'm going to play this video again because, listen, people have babies. People do want to build. You traveling, you meet people after a while. You traveling. You like him. He like you. You like her, and he like her, and whatever. People like each other, and then here comes baby, and baby makes 3. Or you want to pool your resources and get a house. You know, there are things you want to buy. Maybe you want to buy a car. Like you need to have. So when those things come on, you're gonna have to have months. You can't just be like, well, can you switch it for a couple of months and let me do this? When you really want to build legacy and begin to break certain patterns, you know, like a lot of people traveling like, man, I'm making more money than, you know, my parents made or something like that. And so you want to keep building that. So then your kids can do even more, not just money, but the whole wealth thing. And so I'm going to show this video again. And I want us to think about, you know, it's good to be able to spend your money on things, but you also want to recognize what we're teaching, what legacy really is. And so I'm going to do this. And when we come back, a lady who is a broker, she has about 20 something realtors that work under her. And so if you have questions about like what that looks like, lots of people run into things, you know, even though you feel like you're making the money, if you cannot prove that by W-2, you'll be sitting there mad.
Right.
We just want to tell you to position you for success.
Yes.
Okay, so let's do this video one more time, and when we come back, Letitia will be with us. I believe if I can do it. I believe I can do it.
Today I want to talk to you about inheritance versus legacy. Inheritance versus legacy. Those are two separate things. Inheritance is what you leave behind. Legacy is who you leave behind. Inheritance is your life insurance policy. Inheritance is your house. Inheritance is your car. Inheritance is your money. When I die, my wife dies, my children, my grandchildren will have an inheritance. And I think that's a wonderful thing that every responsible person tries to leave an inheritance for their family. But that's different from leaving a legacy. A legacy is who you're going to leave behind. Who will say, he believed in me? Who will say, he gave me an opportunity? Who will say, when I was down, he picked me up? Who will say, he loaned me his credibility? Who will say, he invested in my life? Who will say that I'm here because of him? As good as inheritance is, it'll go away. The house will break down. The car will break down. Something will burn up. This will go away. This will live on. This is your legacy. The question is not, which one should I do? The question is, I know you're working on your inheritance, but I also want you to work on your legacy so you can leave an inheritance as well as a legacy.
All right, so we're back. Everyone, hi Letitia, how are you doing? Letitia Hughes, she's here with us. She's a broker here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, dynamic individual. Definitely helped me with the purchase of property. I believe she's helped a couple of people with purchases of property. And so if you guys have any questions, I don't see Dee anywhere. I was really gonna have her.
Sharon.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us. This is the round table. I hope you can see everyone. Stacy up top, and Philip, and Donnie, and Lila, and myself, and everyone. That's Letitia. So, okay, so back to when people want to build, right? They want to build. We only have about 5 or 6 more minutes, so let's try to be concise. Thank y'all so much for being here, but let's try to be concise. Listen. We all know that people like shortcuts. So can we just call a spade and help people be able to build and call it like, let's call out some foolishness. If everything ain't a shortcut, you know, you can't just be like, hey, write this letter for me right quick. All right. Yeah. You got a letterhead. Like, no, can we, for people who are wanting to build, what are some things that they need to have in place? If they are wanting to buy a house, if they're wanting to begin to invest, if they're wanting to really have a 401k, because a lot of travelers don't often have 401ks or they're even prolonged insurance, like life insurance. What are some things people need to have in place for real? And if you're a fella out there, don't be mad, but you trying to get somebody and you want them to be considering you as a viable option. You know, wait, don't let me be sexist. If you're a female out there, don't be mad, and you want somebody to consider you as a viable option, you gotta have some building blocks, man. You gotta have some building blocks. Ain't nobody got time for that. You gotta have some building blocks. So what are some things people need as far as being building blocks?
I think Letitia may have frozen on us.
Oh, and she looked like she was saying something. I'm gonna pull out. Thank you. I'll bring back anybody else.
Yeah, mine is mindset. Just mindset. You gotta want it.
You have to want it. Is that it? Okay.
I kept it short.
You did keep it short. Anyone else? Looks like Lila and Letitia froze up on me. Oh. Oh, so okay, then I'll just ask some questions. Letitia, you froze. I'm going to tell her on the phone. Siobhan says we all need to.
This is a good time to sell.
Yes, Lorraine asked, is this a good time to sell? But Letitia won't be able to.
Yeah, to answer.
Yeah, she won't be able
I want to piggyback a little bit off of what Lila was talking about earlier with people negotiating their contracts. And we're being part of the staffing industry and having a heart for people and wanting people to really succeed in what they do. One of the things that I struggle with is I think I overshare because as people are asking for the lower hourly rate and for more per diems, I really struggle, and I encourage people, hey, you might want to go ahead and do what the average salary for the area is and minimize your daily food allotments just for future, what you want to do in the future. So as a company, we offer 401k benefits, like full packages, because we really want to invest in people. But I really struggle with that balance of trying not to oversell because I want to see someone successful in the role versus what they feel is an immediate need for the time being with their salaries. So I want to encourage people, even as you go in to negotiate, think about the times how the market has shifted some. So it was beneficial before because we didn't see any dips coming. So you were able to ride from assignment to assignment, maybe continue with getting more per diems or whatever else was needed from month to month. But as we invest in our futures, we might need to take some of our rewards on the back end versus now. So think about that when you're negotiating your next contract, what you can do to benefit some now, but more later. And that's by taking some so you can invest in your 401k or any other pre-tax savings benefits.
That's good. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask, because you said you overshare because you want to help people build. That's based out of your heart. Stacey, why do you just want to, I'm just putting it out there on you. Why do you actually do what you do? Because no shade and no faking the funk. Like everyone on this screen at this time, like you already have, you have revenue coming in, but there's something that there's a reason you share and you continue to do. So why do you, Donnie says she wants to help and she overshares. Why do you do what you do?
Sure. So a big part of the reason that I do what I do is because I feel like there's such a knowledge gap in financial education. A very personal story that's near and dear to my heart is my father passed away 5 years ago, and we found out that, he lost his life insurance when he was 70 years old. And my parents were under the impression that the type of insurance that they had was an investment, when in actuality, it was just a term policy. And they didn't know. And that obviously affected me deeply. As a family, we're collecting funds. And as I'm meeting people and they don't understand how, what debt management is and, having a plan, saving for the future, building that legacy. It's just very near and dear to my heart just to educate people. Without knowledge, people perish, right? And so I kind of made it, one of my life passions to give back as much as I can and just to, help people take that next step, wherever they are.
Excellent. How about you, Philip?
Yeah, it's just, this is my life mission. I think this is, I think this is, without psychoanalyzing myself, it's my life's mission. Put it that way. This is what I was called to do. If I had $100 million in the bank, I would still be doing this. I probably would take fewer fines, but I still would be educated on doing this.
Excellent. Well, it looks like I am unable to get Letitia back or Lila. Listen, I'm going in now to I'm in here, and I do see what one person has sent something to info@ucdileadership.com so that they can come backstage. We're going to go ahead and shut it down. Thank you guys so much for the questions. Please feel free to share this video if you have questions that you did not ask. Again, right there on the ticker,